He's just sitting there watching me. And then I leave the bedroom and he stays in bed and he waits for maybe 5-10 minutes after I make my coffee. He comes out and runs up to me and wags his tail and jumps on me like I've been in Europe for 6 years. It's just a riot.
Looks like the storms are rolling into Oregon. Don't forget to head on in and watch OCA Media.
No, so I think so. I'm good.
Okay, it's 5 o'clock. Let's get started. I'll call to order the Village Board of Oregon for February 17th, 2025. Ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
Beshin? Is she not here? No, she's not here. No, she's not. Higgins?
Here.
Menke?
Here.
Kirchdorfer?
Here.
McDaniel? Here. Peterson? Here. And Van Campen?
Here, thank you. Item 3, approval of February 3rd, 2025 Village Board meeting minutes, if correct, and correction of mistakes, if any. Staff recommendation, motion approved. Jason and Tom. Corrections? Hearing none, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Item 4, public appearances, comments, and communications. Items for discussion and/or possible action. A, presentation from Troop 168 Eagle Scout candidate Samuel Hankey regarding his proposed Eagle Scout service project to plant trees at Prairie Mound Cemetery.
So just real briefly, this is Sam, and I'll let him take the lead here on this whole presentation, but as I kind of wrote in my memo, Sam reached out a couple of weeks ago to Nick Hack and I to discuss this project. We think it's a great one, and so he's here tonight to talk about it.
Hello, my name is Samuel Hankey, and I am from Troop 168. I am a Life Scout currently, and I am presenting on my Eagle Scout project that will take place at Prairie Mound Cemetery. So, just the outline of my project, it would just go over the description of it and showing the cemetery map and where the placement of them would be, of the trees. All the benefits that would happen because of the project, the materials and every cost of it, and what I would need from the village, the short-term maintenance that I would do, and just the overall schedule. So there's a brief map of the cemetery that I believe Cooper King put up. And then, yeah, there's the trees, there's the maps that was given online of the cemetery. So we would be placing 10 trees. Me and Nick went over it, I believe 2 weeks ago, and there would probably be around 2 trees in each of those front areas of section 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Basically where all 12 trees were taken down previously. So that would be a very important thing to replace them, as it's a very important landmark for the city, or village. So yeah, 10 trees will be planted and going to spread them evenly and near the old growth tree sites. So the many benefits that this project would have would not only be, it would spruce up the cemetery significantly, it would add needed greenery, which a lot was taken down. It would provide shade during the summer, spring, and autumn months. It provides vibrant color during fall, replacement for the removed trees, as I've stated. A diverse mix of trees recommended by the DNR and McKay Nursery for use in urban environments like the village. And almost all trees chosen are going to be native to the Midwest and or Wisconsin. So the project materials and cost, I would be needing mulch, water, the trees, tree stakes, and the tree water bags. The mulch would be provided by the Village Public Works Department, and they said they can just take a backhoe and bring it over. The water, they have spigots at the cemetery, and so I would be able to use those. The trees, so 10 trees would each cost around $300 each and equal up to $3,000 total, which I would be requesting a grant from the village, as it says in the outline, I believe. Tree stakes would need to be purchased from most likely Home Depot to keep them up in the early stages so they grow correctly too. And all of these also have links to where I'm finding these. And then the tree water bags the village already has, so that just really helps with the watering on the early processes to slowly release water into the tree, into the root system, and then, yeah. And then I would need help from 2 public work employees for about 6 hours, which equals around $350. And so in total, it would all cost $3,150. So what I would need for assistance from the village-wise, I need help with the tree cost and digging the tree holes. Nick said they would be able to use a hole auger to make the 10 tree holes. The short-term maintenance that I would have to do and would be watering of the trees for around 2 months after planting, which would take place in late April or early May. And then those are two simple steps on how to plant a tree. So my overall schedule, which is already mostly completed. So in January, I had a meeting with Lauren and Nick, discussing my whole plan, going over my project workbook, and giving my presentation to them as well. Today, I have my village board meeting, and then in a few hours, I'm meeting with my troop leaders troop leaders council. And then I hope to get your guys' approval for this project to begin. And then late April / early May 2025, I will be having 2 work days, most likely 2 Saturdays back to back, where I would start and complete the project. Do you guys have any questions?
Questions for Samuel? No? Okay, well, staff recommendation, motion to approve the proposed project and direct Public Works staff to assist with the project as presented and authorize the purchase of up to 10 trees for a cost not to exceed $3,000 from the Cemetery Care Fund. Motion by Tim, second by Amanda. Additional questions or comments?
I just had a comment. I think this is a great project. I really appreciate you bringing this to our attention, and I hope you reach out to the Observer and they'll do a story on this.
Yes, that was part of my project workbook as well, for like public awareness. So, I would reach out to them around 2 weeks to a month beforehand, and they would hopefully put out an article on that.
Great, good job. Really well
Thank
done.
you.
Lynn?
Yeah, really well done. Great detail. I would say when you're finished, send us some pictures. And when
course.
you've got dates set, let us know. We'd be happy to come out and help and be a part of it. So
Okay,
thanks.
of course. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion by Tim, second by Amanda. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much, Samuel.
Thank you, everyone.
4B, Water and Sewage System Revenue Bond Anticipation Note. 1, pre-sale report presented by Village Financial Advisor Ellers. We have Brian with us tonight.
All right. Thank you for having me. Believe the presentation is in your packet as I saw online, and that's what I'm going to kind of walk through here tonight. So essentially, I don't know, I can wait till this. Yeah. What we're looking for, the why we're here in the second slide, is you have this Well 6 project upcoming, and you know that you're going to potentially qualify for the Safe Drinking Water Fund Loan Program. And this is an advantageous program you've used in the past, the 55% of market rates, so lower interest costs. It's advantageous to use this program. However, due to the application process and construction timelines not meeting, you would need some gap financing there. And so what we have identified in talking with staff is it sounds like construction may start in spring of 25, but the Safe Drinking Water Fund loan may not be available till February of 2026. So we're going to kind of talk through some of these options for that gap financing. Just to reiterate or pre-iterate, what we're really looking for action-wise tonight is the borrowing amount that you're looking to take on, kind of the type of borrowing and draw period, or what we'd simplify to say the term, the method of sale, and then if you do send it out to multiple people, a distribution list, and then also just acknowledging that Corals would be involved here as well as bond counsel. So in terms of the type of borrowing, the issue that we have when we use gap financing for the Safe Drinking Water Fund Loan Program is you have to submit disbursements to get your first request or your first payment to close on the loan. And so in order to kind of meet the action items, we typically want the interim borrow to be on a draw basis, because you're going to be getting these contractor pay applications and be able to clearly show when you've drawn funds for this gap financing. So we've found, instead of borrowing it all, taking the full takedown of whatever your borrowing amount is, and then trying to figure out how much we have left, and then how you're gonna pay that off, making sure we earn interest to cover costs in which we haven't received disbursements for. We found it's just kind of easier to close with the state with a draw feature. This is through years of experience. I cannot recommend this enough. In terms of the term, you want to provide time to not pay interest or principal until the village is ready to close on your safe drinking water fund loan. Why? Because the safe drinking water fund loan will not reimburse you for any interim payments, meaning if you have principal due before you close on the loan or interest due before you close on the loan, you'll have to pay out of pocket for that. So we generally want to provide a term that's long enough runway to close on the safe drinking water fund loan program, but also a payment period where everything's due at that final maturity. In addition to that, you want it prepayable at any time so that you don't really know the state schedule. Let's say they're moving, faster than anticipated, which is rare. But if they are, then you can prepay that right before the maturity, so you're not incurring additional accrued interest costs there. So what we have depicted in the later charts, which we don't have to advance to, is just to say what we can choose this for 1/1/27. Generally, a year and a half is acceptable to banks and underwriters for these types of loans, and we'd be at about that year and a half mark. So I think January 1 of 2027 kind of gives you the full 2026 to close on the Safe Drinking Water Fund loan program, which in theory should close no later because the state does have kind of a cutoff date of the fourth Wednesday of September of 2026. So in theory, we could shorten that term if you guys want. I just buy a little extra time of buffer. We've never really seen banks kind of walk at the year and a half timeline. So that's our recommendation here tonight. The other, in terms of type of borrowing, it's called an anticipation note because we don't want one of two things to happen. One, we don't want it to count against your general obligation borrowing capacity. So as an anticipation note, it would not do that. In addition, it wouldn't be like a 1-year revenue bond or a 1.5-year revenue bond, because otherwise you'd have to prove coverage, which would be a little weird because your one payment is going to be a large payment, right? So you'd almost have to increase rates, water and or sewer, in order to kind of prove that you can meet the coverage of the payment. So if you do it as an anticipatory note, the security is actually you're going to borrow in the future. It's not the rate revenues and it's not the general obligation pledge of the village. So we'd run it as an anticipation note. This is again common in our practice in dealing with this situation with communities across the state. Generally, we do recommend doing like an RFP to lenders that can be local or not local, so that one, you can dictate the terms. These have unique needs as I just went through. But then also no different than when you go to market to sell this, which I'll explain why we wouldn't go to market in a second. But you would see your best offer on that day and say, hey, we got the lowest interest rate. That's somebody who can meet the terms that we're offering here. So that's generally our recommendation as it relates to sending that out. The other reason or the other item in terms of not going to market is you do want this kind of privately placed, meaning that it's a direct placement, kind of like if you go to the local bank and get your mortgage. One of the reasons for that is it's so unique. It can be hard to sell in the open market, number one, and number two, it's harder to prepay if you do, see the state closing on the loan early. So as kind of a direct placement or private placement, it just provides more, advantages to the village there. So in looking at that method of sale, one item that we just kind of wanted to reiterate on this slide is all of these unique structures, making sure that you are drafting the terms, and then obviously have the help of bond counsel and the municipal advisor here, which, obviously I'm involved, bond counsel, I think you have on the agenda later tonight, their engagement for this. And then the village would just provide a list, which is one of the items we're looking for action on tonight, is kind of who do you want to send this to? And then I already spoke to the direct placement item here. In terms of the borrowing amount, looks to be about 2.8 and change million for project costs, so certainly you'd want that amount. If you feel there needs to be contingency built in or something to kind of protect yourselves against change orders, certainly you can up that amount. And then costs of issuance, you know, we've already sent the 20,000 for our disclosure, through our disclosure in late January. Corals, this is one element that, depending on how you want to run this, could change their costs. They've just kind of given us the range of 6,500 to 20,000. And then usually we say add a little fluff for bank fees too, not knowing if there will be any. It's again drawable, so certainly you don't have to draw on it, even if you had it in at closing. So that's kind of what we'd be looking for again there, as well as kind of how much would you want this to be for. So in terms of distribution list, so this is the who would we send this to? Village staff did indicate that, now I kind of forget what OCB stands for, but the local bank, one community bank, there we go, got it, all right. So one community bank you guys work with a lot and have a good working relationship for, so village staff did kind of indicate a desire to simplify it, and you could just send it to them. Like I said, can be an advantage to send it to multiple banks. So we did have a discussion with village staff on January 23rd, you know, wherein we talked about we can't act as a broker dealer, so we can't say work with this bank and not this bank. So all I'm doing here is providing a list of banks who have bid on like transactions. The parameters of what defines a like transaction is listed in the little check marks, and then those banks that have bid on other communities' projects are listed there. So if you were to say we want to send it just to OCB or to OCB plus, you know, a list of banks or anybody, any other banks you'd like, this does have to come from the village. So I will say I'll kind of stop there, and we may want to take some conversation on that topic, because I think that's the most important element.
Did you, anything to add, Martin?
I think Brian kind of covered it. You know, typically in short-term borrowings that we've done in the past, we've used one community bank. They're our public depository for our funds. They've been good to work with. We know them, and we know that they'll deliver the product that we want to get. But that said, certainly we could send it out and take bids from different entities as well. It's just up to the village board's choice.
Questions? Amanda, and then looks like Tom.
So this is not necessarily about, you know, the distribution list part of it, but I guess I just want to, keeping an eye on things happening at the national level, and funding is being clawed back, and I guess I'm just wondering, you know, what happens if funding for the clean water program doesn't materialize and we take out the short-term loan? Like, is this something that our budget can absorb? And your thoughts, I guess.
Yep, sure. So if that were to happen, you could always refund it with any sort of debt instrument. So you could go out to market with water and sewer revenue bonds and go get your, you know, flip the financing that way instead of the Safe Drinking Water Fund loan. So,
Okay.
yep.
Thank you.
Tom?
Yeah, I don't have any problems with direct placement, just with the caveats that they understand the terms and that that they are giving a fair rate. And I guess I would have to rely on someone else to tell me what the fair rate is right now. So I don't have any problem with that at all. And I guess the term, I guess I would January 1st of 2027. I guess, do we want to extend that just because of what Amanda brings up, that we're seeing things cloudy as far as to financing and how things are going right now?
I would say you're going to have a pretty definitive answer, yes or no, from the Safe Drinking Water Fund loan program November of this year, if you make their list. So that would be the, hey, do we even fully qualify for this? And then in terms of, what happens with federal support to the program, if anything were to happen, along the way, it's prepayable at any time, so we could flip it to market revenue bond. If we get continued consternation or to a point where village staff or the village board is uncomfortable waiting on the state, go to market as soon as possible would be my recommendation. You lock in your interest rate at that point, absent the fact that there's some weird economic event that we feel is distorting the market results at that time. So that said, I don't know if necessarily extending it is necessary, because we'd have all of our answers, and then the final cutoff for the most part is going to be the end of September of 2026. So,
Thank you.
Lauren, did you have anything to add? I know you stepped out.
And I apologize, I
No?
was kind of out,
That's fine.
so can you repeat the question?
Oh. I just wondered if you had anything to add. I think Brian's covered it well in your memo, but
Yes,
I want to give you another chance to.
I appreciate that. I think
Okay.
that Brian's covered it probably better than I could, so.
Okay,
Could I just ask one question?
please.
Can we get clarity on the Corals and Brady fee, why there was such a wide range? there?
Yeah,
Is that
so-
based on how we choose?
The lowest one was if you go straight to a bank and don't want an opinion, like that this is a legal transaction, which admittedly sounds sketchy, but but essentially if the bank is saying, hey, we'll meet your terms, the paperwork is done by the bank, and it's something that you are comfortable with based off of your relationship with the bank rather than having Corals do all of the documents, that's kind of their low-end price. I've never met a transaction where I wouldn't want that legal sign-off, but they just wanted to provide that. They weren't sure of why not send it to multiple banks, so they were just kind of like, we'll provide them all the information. So they said kind of our lowest fee is usually just kind of document review at that point, and not providing a legal opinion would be the 6,500. And to that end, like I said, I did recommend to staff to just kind of fully engage Corals, regardless of if you're sending it to one or multiple banks. But that's our recommendations. Certainly you guys can decide, how you want to work with them.
Anybody else? Amanda?
Yeah, so I just want to, for clarification, are we thinking about just doing to one community bank, or we are considering maybe putting it out to multiple to see who has better rate?
It
or
sounds like
We're gonna, that's part of what we're deciding?
Yeah, that's the question before the board right now.
Okay, okay.
Lynn, please.
Yeah, I guess if you're looking for at least someone's opinion on this, Tom gave a pretty good one. I think I'm okay going to one community bank. I inherently don't love the idea of not opening it up to everyone, but one community bank has proven to be a great partner and a great community partner as well. They've assisted in a lot of other projects, and so I think for something like this, which we're sort of using to hedge our bets a bit, they're a great partner to utilize, so I'm okay with that.
I would agree. Any further questions, comments?
Phil,
Okay.
if I could add.
Please.
So I think maybe approach here, and Brian, correct me if I'm wrong here on this thinking. We could take this to one community bank and they'll provide a proposal. We'll have Ellers review it, we'll have Corals review it, and if we get any feedback that, hey, maybe this isn't as good as what we're seeing elsewhere, or what they're seeing in their experience, I think a potential option then would be for staff to say, okay, let's go look at a couple different options then at that point. We'll start with OCB, get the advice and experience from our team here, and then decide to pivot from there.
Okay, I would make a motion then to approve this per staff and Eller's recommendations with caveat that we will have Eller's and the staff. Oh, pardon
wanna-
me. You have
we might
something?
have,
The only thing that I would add is, I think you have do you have the resolution
yeah,
as a
Yeah,
part of
that's-
this?
yeah.
I would not adopt that.
Okay.
Because it was drafted in the manner of you're sending it to multiple banks, because that was kind of like the bigger element. Just note for these types of transactions, like the pre-sale resolution or set sale resolution is not required. We just do it because, kind of transparency's sake, normal run of course, if you will. That said, if you're just gonna send it to one community bank, it's kind of going against the resolution as drafted. So I would just kind of say, you can make your motion that we're gonna send it to one community bank, as presented, and then not adopt that resolution, if that makes sense.
Well, so are we tabling the resolution and just instructing staff to send it out to once OCB then? Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Do we want to include any of the other terms or decision points that are highlighted in your presentation tonight as part of that resolution?
Yeah, I would just say if, it sounded like everybody was okay with the term, how long we're having this out, the distribution list being the one bank. The one other one would be, how much, in terms of, what do you wanna borrow for? So if you wanna, do 41,000 for cost of issuance, again, this is gonna be drawable, and just $1,000 for bank fees. They probably won't charge you anything given your relationship, but that said, just add 41,000 to the 2.8, so you're really at 2.858. If you want that to be the drawable amount, or whatever other opinions are in the room there.
Yeah, I guess the current resolution shows 3,050,000.
That was due to, we had the project costs when we provided it to Corals at $3 million of project costs, and then staff came back with the 2.817. That's a big change there, yeah. At the same token, right, it's gonna be drawable. You could set it to whatever dollar amount really you want.
so you want to postpone, Martin, or table, or?
I think we'd want a motion to, I guess, authorize staff to pursue this obligation with
Yeah.
the terms of,
As
I
presented.
think there's a few things. So the term would be 1/1/2027. The method of sale would be direct placement with one community bank.
Yep.
And a drawable amount of 2.858
Yep.
million. And I believe that would be it.
Yep.
Would you,
Okay, so
would you
that-
add the prepayment clause in there as well, or is that just a?
Yeah, the terms as presented, I think, is suitable to kind of meet there as, it's drawable. There's no interest or principal due until the maturity, and that it's prepayable at any time without penalty.
So, and then what this will look like coming out of this is, so we'll go take care of that direction, and then it will come back
Yep.
to be a final approval,
Correct.
probably in a month or so.
Yep.
And you'll approve the actual borrowing at that point. So we have the direction to go and basically negotiate that and put that together.
So the motion is, for my clarity, not to pass the resolution, but the language that you just laid out.
Correct.
Okay, so I'll make that motion as per language. And second by Tim. Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Thank you.
Sorry?
Since the resolution is on there, we don't need to, like, vote on it and say no on that?
Correct, no. Just
Okay.
no action is fine.
No. Okay, thank you. Item 4C, public comment. This part of the agenda allows members of the public to provide information to the village board, including items both on and off the agenda. 15 minutes will be provided for this item with a 3-minute maximum per speaker. Otherwise, the agenda will proceed as posted. Anyone here for public comments? Anyone? Okay, moving on. Item 5, approval of vouchers in the amount of $1,200,111.72. Staff recommendation, motion to approve as presented. Jason and Amanda. Questions, comments? Hearing none, roll call vote, please.
Mankey,
Yes.
McDaniel,
Yes?
Peterson,
Yes.
Higgins,
Yes.
Van Campen,
Yes.
and Kirchdorfer.
Yes.
Okay, consent agenda, item 6. Staff recommendation, motion to approve the consent agenda items, items 6A through 6I. Tom and Jason, questions, comments?
Just had a question in relationship to the purchase of a refrigerated wastewater sampler replacement for the Oak Hill. Could you just enlighten me on what an Oak Hill resampler is, and then why does it need to be refrigerated? And
Yes, I'd be happy to. So essentially, the village has an agreement with the state of Wisconsin Correctional Department to take wastewater from Oak Hill Correctional Institution, which is just north of, I believe it's so up in the village or city of Fitchburg. And as part of that, it's a bit of a unique case because it's a pretty heavy user. The village has its own agreement with Oak Hill that they pay a certain amount plus surcharges based on flow limits as well as constituent limits within the wastewater. So BOD, total suspended solids, and phosphorus. And to get those numbers to make sure that we're charging them appropriately, we continually collect samples at a manhole that's over kind of right by Market and Braun, in that tiny little park that exists out there. There is a monitoring manhole out there that houses this sampler, and our staff goes out routinely and collects these samples and brings them back and analyzes them in their in-house lab. And because of what we're testing for, we do have to keep it refrigerated to make sure that we're getting accurate numbers. This sampler, I believe, is about 20 years old and just wore out, essentially. So this is something that is very much applicable for our DNR mandated replacement fund for the sewer. So that's where funding is coming from.
and are collected fees from the, so this is basically a tool to administer a process to the, so we can manage the Oak Hill relationship.
Correct, yep.
And our fees are substantially over the $13,000 that this piece of equipment costs.
Yes, if you add them up, not on kind of a month-by-month basis, I believe we charge them $1,500, $2,000 per month, but if you add that up over the year, yes, this will more than make up for that.
Will this automate or simplify the process at all? Is there any new technology involved in this, or will we still have the same process?
Not really, this is not one of those that a lot has changed over 20 years, so it's essentially the same process.
Thank you.
Okay, further questions, comments on the consent agenda? All right, we have a motion by Tom, a second by Jason. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 7, reports of committees, item for discussion and or possible action. A, Park Board. 1, playground development, design, permitting, bidding, and construction phase services proposal from Rutland Corporation for Gary Dish Park, Park Board, and staff recommendation, motion approved as presented. Amanda and Lynn. And Elise.
Yep, I can give a little background on this. So Gary Dish Park is located within Phase 2 of Autumn Ridge neighborhood. This is a very long-awaited park in the neighborhood. which serves obviously the larger kind of Autumn Woods area as well as Autumn Ridge. There's some unique circumstances over here with just the topography of the park. The developer put in just some of the pictures on the next couple pages show sort of a stair-step plateau. So there's a small parking area off street, just kind of a bump out. There's a lower area planned for a future playground, and then further down there's a larger multi-use playing field. The plan again has always been to do a playground on that kind of middle plateau. Just given the kind of slope here, definitely needs some help with accessibility, getting some eyes on how to get down there safely, and not just the playground but to the field itself, so that can be used and we won't have a kind of eroded hillside. I think it'd be great for sledding, but for getting up and down on a rainy, wet day, I was definitely having a hard time just going up and down there, and this was a couple months ago. So we reached out to Rattler Corporation that's helped us with JC Community Park as well as Highlands of Netherwood park design. They're civil engineers and landscape architects, so we reached out to them to get a proposal for services for playground, solid servicing, so that accessible kind of pour in place servicing that we have at the JC and Highlands of Netherwood playgrounds now. Our park plan recommends installing that wherever possible. So those two items, landscaping as well as an ADA accessible route to get to the playground and the field. So the proposal that's on the following pages includes all those services. Our plan would be to do design through 2025. This would definitely involve neighborhood outreach and involvement, kind of as much as the neighborhood wants to be involved. We'll probably run that either through park board or at a separate meeting, but it's kind of a park board led process, and then recommendation to the board once we have a final design. And then bidding hopefully over the winter and construction in 2026. So this will be playable hopefully later in the year in 2026, at least the playground. I know the field is growing in, and the timing should match up that everything is kind of open at the same time. So their total fee is just over $32,750, and then assumes a total project budget of around $250,000. We have about $200,000 in our CIP for 2025. So as the plans come along, we might shift some of that around a little bit and maybe split it up between 25 and 26 a little bit more. But happy to take any questions.
So,
And is it already graded for a playing field in there, or is that grading that will have to be done?
Yes, the playing field, we're not planning any changes to the playing field, so that's already in place. I know Eric, Public Works team, has been kind of babying the grass and watching it grow and making sure that it's in good condition when it comes in. But yeah, nothing would actually really touch that playing field except for that path to get down to that level.
Lynn?
Yeah, my only comment, and I hesitate to give this comment because I know how busy you all are, but my family actually went sledding at Gary Dish this weekend. It's an awesome place to go sledding if you're looking for one. But in my conversation with some of the people who were there in the neighborhood, they are very anxious to get this going and to put this in place. So anything that we can do to speed this along, please let us know. There's not really much we can do, but of course reach out, because I think this is going to be really important for that area of the village.
Anybody else? Okay, we have a motion by Amanda, second by Lynn. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Elise. Okay, 7B, Planning Commission, 1, application for extraterritorial certified survey map submitted by Valkyrie Farm LLC, creating 2 lots located at 1580 and 1586 County Highway D in the town of Oregon. This just involves our ETG zoning. We've seen these before. Generally, we don't object. Anything to add, Elise? So we're looking for a motion to approve. Tim and Amanda. Additional comments, questions?
This is all the way out by Fish Hatchery. Right?
It's right by Swan Pond on the curve there.
Yeah,
Yep, near the
Yeah.
Rotary Trail
where it ends.
parking
Yep.
lot. Mhm.
Right.
So I guess the recommendation in the packet is to take no action. So is
Well,
that-
Say we not,
Decide
we
not
don't
to
oppose it. This is always
No,
Just
no,
like
you,
that.
you do need to take an action.
It's a
Yeah.
Yes.
action to
action to not oppose, right?
Action to not oppose.
Yeah,
complicated. Yeah.
thank you for that, Tom. Okay, we have a motion, a second. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Item B2, Planning Commission, ordinance number 25-01, an ordinance amending the official zoning map for property located at 169, 203, and 215 South Main Street to the multifamily residential -8 MR8 zoning district and planned development PD-2025-01 overlay zoning district MSP real estate senior affordable multifamily housing. Planning Commission and staff recommendation, motion to approve as presented. We have a motion by Jason. Second by Tom. And Elise probably wants to talk about this one.
Sure. I can give as little or as much detail on this one as you all would like. I know some of you were at the planning commission meeting 2 weeks ago, and when this was before them at the January meeting, just a conceptual level. We also had a neighborhood meeting in January, but these properties are just south of UW Health Clinic. There's one parcel in between, a residential parcel in between, but 3 parcels there off South Main Street. They are in, our comp plan showed this as a mid-scale residential, so obviously there's lots of single family that can continue to remain and be lived in, but when there are opportunities for redevelopment, this is an area that we've said, given its adjacency to downtown, wanting to have more vibrant downtown, more people living near downtown, this would be an appropriate area to look at options for higher density housing. So MSP Real Estate has these properties under contract from the owners. They are proposing a up to 60 unit senior affordable multifamily development. I did just get word earlier today that WIDA kind of has a 2-step process now, sort of a pre-application and then an invitation to submit a full application. So they have gotten an invitation to submit the full application to WIDA. And part of that requirement is that zoning be kind of secured by the middle of March. So that's why they have kind of an accelerated timeline for the zoning request, this GDP, which is asking for flexibilities or exceptions from our multifamily zoning district where they don't meet the by right requirements. So things like the parking requirement, density, building height, setbacks, those are all listed in the staff report and in the ordinance there. But those need to be secured for them to be able to move forward with their full WIDA application later this spring. So there's still a lot of details, whether it's the facade of the building, what it's going to look like, the actual site kind of layout where the buildings and driveways and all that is going to go. This step is really, again, just that zoning exception, kind of that it's a rezoning to multifamily, but specifically their requests that are made that are listed out there kind of gives them the meets and bounds or the box to work within. So as long as they stay, no closer, they don't get any closer than 15 feet to the front property line, or they don't do more than 60 units or whatever those, again, flexibilities that are listed are asked for, they can kind of operate within the box that they've drawn for themselves. So the second step of this approval is a site plan or SIP, specific implementation plan. I would expect that would probably come later spring or summer once they have had the time to get feedback from, we've already gotten some initial feedback to them from fire, from public works, a lot from the neighborhood. I've sent them a lot of just photos and ideas about like building facade. What I think that was kind of one of the resounding comments from the neighborhood was that they wanted to make sure it would fit in with the neighborhood as far as design, kind of honoring the history of the neighborhood there. A lot of questions too about screening, landscaping, traffic patterns, things like that too. So we answered, I think, a few of those at the planning commission meeting, and then some of those will be addressed as the plan is further developed, and that site plan level review happens later in the year. So the planning commission recommended, I think it was 5-1 vote, to recommend this to the planning commission or to the village board.
Jason?
So I just want to say that in terms of the conceptual plan and the zoning, I'm really excited about this. Affordable housing for seniors in our community is really, really needed. I also think that this goes along with our goal to provide more housing in a financially sustainable way. We know multifamily does that very well. And multifamily is also very green. So I'm excited to see this project and hope it moves forward.
Tim?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that the neighborhood isn't necessarily in favor of this, or that there's a lot of opposition within the neighborhood. I did drive through there this weekend, and I think this would be pretty much of a change. But I think to echo what Jason said, affordable senior housing is a critical need in Dane County, and it's an important need here in Oregon. And also, I think Greg made a great point at the planning commission meeting that if we want restaurants to survive downtown, we need people eating in those restaurants, and people within walking distance of them are more likely to dine at them. So I think there's a lot to like about this. I just think that as we get to the next phases and start working on the design, we have to be really careful that we're not too dramatically changing the nature of that neighborhood. And I know you're committed to working through on that, so I appreciate your efforts on this to sort of shape it in a way that will help the neighborhood feel like we did a good job here, because I think it's an important need, and I'm in support of it overall.
Tom?
I strongly in favor of any senior project or any senior affordable housing project, and it's a great thing. Our community really needs it. I think they're very well aware, the developer and the all involved are very aware of the need to blend in with the neighborhood and the architecture and the feel of the neighborhood. I guess my biggest concern on this project is the amount of traffic that is involved. We're going from a couple family unit dwellings into 60, and there is no way out of that community going north. Everything has to go south or into one of the side streets. I guess I've seen an awful lot of traffic impact there, and I guess I just need to see something that addresses that along the way too. And that'll just to pile on top of everything else that the community's been to that, but that to me really stands out as an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Lynn and Amanda?
Yeah, I'm going to echo most of what this board is saying. I think that this is really important. I understand that change can be really scary and difficult, but I think there are two factors that really contribute to my leaning in approval of these flexibilities. One being that we as a board have acknowledged that senior and affordable housing is a priority for us. And second, we have invested a lot of money in a downtown master plan, which acknowledges that there are some areas of our downtown area that could use some more density and vibrancy and bringing some of that. And that investment should be acknowledged through action instead of just words on paper. And so I think this is our opportunity to actually put some effort behind some of the money that we've invested in understanding how to best utilize that space. So I'm definitely in favor of these.
Amanda?
Yeah, so this is also my neighborhood. So I like the idea of this I'm not against it on principle or anything like that. We have to densify our housing and senior housing and multifamily is a good option. It's good for business, lots of things. I was at the planning commission meeting and heard what my neighbors had to say, and they made what I thought were some really good suggestions. They are also not necessarily against it on principle. They would just like to see some modifications, which I think is fair. Things like making like making it a lower story, like maybe one or two
Like the
story
step
in the
back.
front, and then, yeah, step back, thank you. And higher in the back, and then, like wraparound porch, or something like that to make it feel like it's a homier feel, right? Or, some interesting ideas, and, as long as the developer is willing to accommodate where they can and take those comments into consideration, I think this is a great idea. I don't have any major issues with it, but obviously we have to look at traffic. We have to make it fit with the neighborhood, those types of things, but I think that can be done. This is a decent sized plot of land to work with, and I think this is the beginning. I think we just approve the zoning and we can move forward.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, we have a motion by Menke, second by Kirstover. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Elise. Item 3, Village of Oregon Downtown Master Plan, presentation of recommended plan by project consultant, redevelopment resources, and review by the village board.
I'll just give a little catch up for you guys while Ashley and Dana get set up here. So I think our consultants for the downtown plan were probably before you in November, last with an update. Since then, we've gone through just a couple of revisions through the planning commission. Some of the main changes I know they'll highlight, but kind of an overarching vision statement was added. And reviewed 2 weeks ago at the planning commission meeting, and then also some design guidelines were added as well. So those are in an appendix towards the end of the plan, but kind of give some concrete examples. Don't do this instead, with some pictures as far as things like when there's new development, what do we want to see? If there's replacement of windows or improvement of facades, things like that. What are some concrete examples? So I think the planning commission was pleased with those. I felt that they would be helpful changes to the version of the plan. So I'll let you guys reintroduce yourselves, and maybe just kind of, I'll let maybe Lauren can kind of scroll through the plan and can highlight some of the sections just to kind of orient you, because it is a long document. But hand over to you guys, and then planning commission recommended approval. So if you all are satisfied with the changes that have been made and kind of where the plan is, then we can wrap this one up with a bow.
Great. Well, thanks, Elise. Thanks for having us again tonight. I'm Ashley Sarver with Studio GWA, and have with me Dana Sarver, no relation, from Redevelopment Resources. We've been working together for many years, and we also drive the same car. So anyway, we work well together.
Yes, we
do. We can just kind of run through the document. We won't go page by page here, but happy to kind of jump back to any section if we want to talk more in depth about anything. So just really on the front page, I think the thing that we're trying to capture here, and this is a theme that was incorporated into the document, was small town charm with a bustling future. And that really helped guide some of the principles that were held throughout the plan. It captures a lot of what we heard during public engagement, and then really informed the recommendations. So if we jump through, I'm just going to look at page 5 here on the executive summary. We talk about the emerging theme of small town charm with a bustling future, and then the 4 principles that are kind of behind that. So the first being enhance the downtown center as a place to gather. 2, increase housing opportunities for this growing community. 3, provide additional retail and commercial space for the expanding business interest. And 4, promote walkability and bikeability. And so when we go through the opportunity sites, as we call them later on, each site is tied to these principles and is related back to them. So each opportunity site really represents at least one or more of these principles in practice.
Next, we'll head over to the document review, which starts on page 8. So we use the comprehensive plan and the sustainability plan that were both adopted in 2023 as just furthering of those ideas and themes that came out of that. So your comp plan said that you needed to assure that the desired character was maintained, that there were appropriate uses and strategies for redevelopment on key sites. The historic and architectural significant buildings needed to be preserved, and there needed to be tools to promote redevelopment and integration of public art and more active events. Sustainability plan, that there was several different goals and strategies that we highlighted in the document review section. Next, we'll move on to stakeholder engagement, and I'll just recap how that was conducted. We did one large community survey, attended 5 local events, conducted a business owner focus group, a resident walking tour, and a resident survey, individual interviews, and 1 open house. The community survey had 458 completed surveys, and they indicated that specialty retail, sit-down restaurants, and experiential retail were the top 3 things that they felt was missing from downtown. They also prioritized it as being a vibrant destination that was both economically successful and its historic character preserved. So those were the top 3 priorities. With the local events, the historic character, the small town charm, the community in being a place of peacefulness. I can talk. And being a vibrant community was that offered a diverse mix of dining, retail, and recreational spaces, and improved accessibility that would enhance the downtown experience. Were things that we heard in those during that feedback while we were sharing the purpose of the plan. There were 13 business representatives and the business owner focus group session. They saw that Old Village Hall was seen as a potential driver for downtown economic development, and ideas included converting it to apartments, businesses, and retail spaces. So again, creating that atmosphere of diverse offerings, having a captured audience for diverse retail and experiences was a priority for them. 15 residents from the quarter-mile area of the downtown joined us for a walking tour, and there were 112 complete survey responses from that quarter-mile area as well. They saw that there was potential for new development, and there was a strong preference for maintaining the historic character and charm of the downtown, with an emphasis on tasteful, small-scale developments that integrate with the existing architecture. We also met with 3 developers, a bank, 2 realtors, 4 property owners, with holdings downtown, staff from the senior center, and the Oregon School District between July and August. They saw that there was really great opportunities for programming downtown. There was lots of different access points into the downtown. This was an opportunity for the village to do something very creative and transformational in the redevelopment of the Old Village Hall. And having public restrooms, that was the comment we heard a lot. Just saying, that was like, everyone was like, it would be great. And then we also met with the Oregon Fire and EMS District and learned that there was a feasibility study being conducted for 2025. Finally, we held an open house in October. Attendees were pleased to see the options were for a more intense utilization of Waterman Triangle Park. the addition of public restrooms, and the addition of more performance and gathering space. There was still concern about parking. Let's just sit with that one for a minute. Those who expressed concerns over density on South Main Street site wanted to see more of a landscape buffer between the development and neighboring residential sites. And attendees were generally accepting of the relocation of the Quick Trip out of the downtown and converting it to a more mixed-use development and more intense uses for the BMO site. And then we're going to move on to the economic development section. Thank you. So one of the concerns that the village board and the planning commission had was making sure that the responses we got in the survey were a reflection of the community as a whole. So I found it very interesting that the data that we received from the survey matched really well with the data that we've got from government surveys as well. So it was very representative. And let's see. While opportunities for engagement varied from in-person, online, and even hard copy input, the consulting team desired to measure the input of the data. The majority of opinions from stakeholders were not dramatically different from what we expected to see from the data, and that's how we arrived at our recommendations.
So the recommendations kind of play out in the form of these 10 opportunity sites and then a section after that's on programming and policy. So I'll focus on a couple of these sites, and then, like I said before, if we want to dive into any of the details of any of them, I'm happy to do that. On page 27 there, which is the next page, you'll see site 1, we'll talk about the town square. On the right is kind of that beige box that outlines each concept and then how those sites align with the principles that we talked about at the beginning. So for the town square, there's really three design scenarios that we went through. One is all of them are kind of build on each other and can be intensified. So the downtown center came through as a place that people want to gather. People are already gathering there. And so the enhancement really came in to play in that scenario. If you want to go to page 39, that's kind of the visualization piece. Like Dana mentioned, there's the introduction of public restrooms on the site. There is the expansion of the park area to be open to the parking lot, thinking about a curbless paver so that there's more of a blend between park and parking lot so that when there are events, that space can blend more seamlessly. That's also the opportunity to introduce permeable pavers to be able to have a better sustainable flow, and that came up in the sustainability plan. There's also the introduction of additional street trees within this scenario, and it really has the opportunity to grow events. Right now with Waterman Triangle Park, there's the trees kind of enclose that section, so this would be an expansion of that. On the right is the intensification option, which introduces additional buildings to the site. It keeps generally the layout of the park the same, but introduces some additional buildings to the site, which could be mixed-use buildings, allowing for first-floor commercial space, upper-floor residential. And you'll see that in all of the scenarios, it outlines an area around the downtown, including where the Soldiers Memorial is, of a paver introduction that introduces, this is a distinction that this is downtown, this is where we gather. It would also provide the opportunity, if you wanted, to be able to barricade down just where those pavers are. So if there was a bigger event, you could reroute traffic to go up Spring Street and around, and that's really just an indication that this is the gathering space. Again, with permeable pavers, there's an ability to be able to manage the stormwater in that capacity as well. This also still has the restroom on site. There's also an introduction of a water feature. It does maintain some parking, but it is limited. It's not, I think we go from 36 as it is currently and in option 1 down to 18 in this other scenario. And if you look at option 3, it's really a switch of where the building and where the band shell would be located. we thought adding that building to the corner really creates a really strong corner, especially as people drive to downtown, to be able to see this kind of landmark piece. And one of the buildings there on the right, you slide just a little bit to the right further, of kind of that corner turret, you see that as an example building. Not that the building would have to look exactly like that, but it's a design feature that helps really landmark the area and bring some additional notoriety to that corner. And that building doesn't have to alone just be, you know, a private building. There would be the potential on the backside of that to have it act more as a plaza. You know, when there are events at the park, that could be opened up and extended seating. It could be a restaurant to serve, you know, food and drinks and better serve the area as well. So that's just an intensification of that site. In a lot of our public feedback, there was a lot of questions about what's happening with Village Hall, and so that was our opportunity site number 2, where we looked at the history of that. It's a great historic building, WPA project, and so one of the things we'd like to see with that and are recommending would be the redevelopment of that. There was interest in artist lofts as well as artist studio space, so you could do that as a combination with the lower level, which still has windows, introducing artist studios there, and then upper floor apartments, or just go all apartments. There really, you know, there was the ideas tossed around about could this house a lot of different businesses, different retailers, and in our opinion, without that street face, without that storefront type style, it's really better suited for either residential or the studio combination. I'll skip through. Opportunity Site 3 is the senior center, and really we already know that that's underway and happening. I think we just wanted to make sure that that was outlined as part of this plan because it is an imminent improvement to the downtown area. The other sites, you know, 4, 5, and 6 there are the introduction of, well, number 4 is the current fire department. If in their feasibility study they decide to expand and need to go beyond their current borders, we're introducing a concept that would expand that building to the north. And I know there were some concerns too about cut-through traffic. We tried to provide some additional recommendations on how to cut down on some of that cut-through traffic. So whether that's doing a right in, right out only, or introduction of planters to close off a section of it while still maintaining the same number of parking spaces. However, if you did have a building there, like we're showing in number 4, that would certainly block the cut-through traffic as well. But with opportunity sites 5 and 6, you'll see, you know, smaller scale, mixed-use buildings, everything right to the street face to encourage walkability. So that people are coming right up to those buildings, but also encouraging upper floor residential. So again, you know, providing that same population that would frequent these businesses. And if you move through site 7, oh, it is right there on the corner of Janesville and Main Street, introducing another corner building. So that, again, you have that strong presence on the corner to be able to make, just kind of close in that room. Our other recommendation in that intersection is to shorten the span of the crosswalk as you cross Main Street, so that it's a little bit more comfortable for pedestrians, and introduction of a scramble traffic signal so that all cars stop at some point and pedestrians can cross without having to question whether is it okay if I go now or do I need to wait. So that's kind of a safety feature, but a way for people to more comfortably cross that intersection, especially as there's more development happening in this area. Opportunity Site 8 is the current site of the BMO Harris Bank. Thinking that long term, you know, there's a lot of land there, and there's potential for a lot of additional development to occur there. Also with the proximity, I know there's the creek on the north end of that site. There's also the opportunity to do some rain gardens. You wouldn't have to do your traditional detention pond to alleviate some of that. And it might come down also to just design of, you know, how high do those buildings need to rise off of that area in order to make sure that there's not flooding concerns long term. Site 9 is the South Main site. That was the item just discussed prior to this. We showed two different options with that. On the left is the demolition of the current buildings and introduction of a mixed-use building as well as apartments on the back end. And then on the right, we showed an option where those residential houses would stay and be converted to commercial. And then the apartment building tucked into the back end of that building closer to the railroad. And finally, Site 10 is on Janesville Street. It's currently a few single-family homes. And with interest in development, this is kind of a natural progression from that area. And so this is shown as townhomes, these, as a possible walk-up townhome that you could do 2 or 3 stories. With that, I'll hand it over to Dana to talk through some of the programs and policy recommendations.
So we broke down the program and policy recommendations into 7 buckets: economic development, community engagement and collaboration, cultural programming, mobility and accessibility, placemaking and public space activation, safety and maintenance, and branding and marketing. So within each of those, you're going to have a set of recommendations that are then also in a matrix, the implementation matrix, which further highlights when those could potentially start, who's potentially responsible for seeing that through to completion, and where you can get potential funding to see those through the finish line. I will. You've read it. I won't go through all of them.
And finally, after the implementation matrix is the design guidelines, like Elise mentioned. It's not necessarily a checklist of each development, go through this, but it's kind of guiding principles of sensitive development and how that guidelines on how for that to happen downtown. So things like signage, the facades, the fenestration of buildings, which is just the massing of the buildings and how it appears at the street face, and incorporating more of those traditional design elements. Because there's such an interest in historic preservation in the community and maintaining that small town feel, that was a recommendation of ours, is maintaining the traditional design. It doesn't have to, mimic old, but having some of those same design principles in line is a recommendation from our team. And I believe that's it. So we would welcome any questions, comments.
Jason?
All right. First, Dana and Ashley, first I want to say thank you for all of your work, and thank everyone from village staff to residents who gave their input on this. I know this was, well, it looks to me to be a Herculean task, so thank you for that and for all of the input. And I think what you've presented here reflects a lot of what I've heard from residents as well, which I really appreciate. I also really like the downtown for more gathering space, the art fair working down there. I can see a holiday market going down there in the winter, something like New Glarus has. I know they have a market down there, and for more community gathering and community space, and for more commercial development and dense housing. I appreciate that as well. I also share the concern with the cut-through traffic. For those who are wondering, the Fire EMS Commission is doing the space plan. I'm on that commission. We're working on reading through space needs proposals from companies and working through that process, so we do it well. I like the idea of, if there is the space and if it makes sense, to have the option to go north. My question is, and this is just, I don't know how this works, and I might have missed it in here. For the things like the Quick Trip and the BMO Harris Bank, we don't own those properties. Those are privately owned. How do you make that actionable or begin to move forward on things like that? Obviously, it has to be a conversation and partnership, but I'd love to learn more about how that works.
Yeah, in some ways it's, conversations, and it's a long game. To show the vision and see that this is the vision that the community has adopted. just having a document that you can take to the current property owners and say, this is something, the community is interested in seeing, and getting a pulse on whether they're, what their long-term plans are. But otherwise, it would mean, a sale to another likely private developer. And again, having this document in place, so when those proposals come forward of ideas of what to develop there, there's just the ability to have a more detailed conversation. I don't know if Elise, you'd have anything to add to that, but.
Yeah, I would just say, I mean, the previous agenda item, the South Main Street senior multifamily, it's a good example that, the timelines were kind of running in parallel as far as wrapping this plan up and then coming forward with an idea for the site. But, as we move into site plan design and look at, how can we make the building fit in with the neighborhood and activate downtown, those types of we can take some of the feedback from this plan and incorporate that into our review of that proposal on that site. I think there's an understanding that these are just concepts, right? They're just boxes on paper right now. It kind of shows more scale, what could go there, what would be a good kind of transition into the neighborhood, or what would be a good fit within downtown. But I don't think there's expectation that just because the rectangles are here on the plan means that that's where the rectangles need to go. I don't know that's ever probably the case from a plan that's at this level to an actual site plan. There's all kinds of things that go into, consideration with where the stormwater ponds need to go and plants, and every project's unique, so it's reviewed on a case by case, basis. But having some of the overarching goals and guidance from this plan, when those opportunities come up, it gives us a starting point to say, this is what we've heard from the community that we'd like to see, knowing that your plan's going to be different, but how much of this plan can we incorporate into your site?
So it gives us a larger vision as we make individual decisions moving forward.
And sometimes, like specifically with the BMO case, you can find examples of where upper story residential has partnered with a bank because they're trying to shrink their footprint. And so if you can bring to the table the banker and the housing developer and say, hey, we've got this idea, what do you guys both think? Then that just gets the conversation started.
Well, thank you. And I want to say, I forgot to say specifically thank you to Elise, because I know that you put a lot of work and effort into this, so I appreciate your work on this as well.
Tim and Tom?
Yeah, I have lots of thoughts, but to kind of build on where Jason was going there, I'm concerned about publishing a report that says you guys need to leave downtown, BMO and Quick Trip, and I think we have to manage sort of how that's communicated. Like, the way it reads now, it's sort of like, you've been voted off the island, we're doing something else with your property, and I think we have to be a little bit more respectful of their business and maybe reach out and have a conversation there before this gets published or before it gets adopted. Because it would feel, I just think if I was in their shoes, I would feel a little bit disrespected to read this if it was published and go, wait, what? Because I don't know that they were involved in any of these conversations, right?
Those two, I don't think specifically. I will say, I mean, like our comprehensive plan, our future land use maps, we're speaking for a lot of properties that aren't even in the village boundaries, or ones that are in the village boundaries, and saying, we'd like to see a change here. We're not necessarily consulting each individual property owner and say, are you okay if this is planned neighborhood? Are you okay if this switches from low scale to mid scale residential or something like that? So there are other instances where we have plans that we're saying, this is the community's vision for this area. These are opportunity sites because they're underutilized. They have potential for more density or more activation of sites. But yeah, I would say their comp plan is probably a similar case where we're kind of speaking on behalf of larger village goals rather than consulting individual property owners. But I hear you.
Overall, I wish I would have seen a little bit more that would help the existing downtown businesses. And I didn't feel like there was a lot in here for that. I think the thing I liked the most was the scramble crosswalk. I've always thought that that's screwy intersection. I observe mostly what happens is people will cross twice there. They'll cross two streets and they wait for the light the first time and then they jaywalk the second time. And I don't think it's all that safe, so I like that. I would also then just say that the growth in what's been presented versus what I saw back in October or November, when that is, to now, I think there's been a lot filled in, and I really appreciate the effort that's gone into that. So thank you for your time and effort.
Yeah, and if I could just comment on the existing businesses, I think because they are existing, maybe physically in the concept images, they're not showing as strongly because they are already existing. But we, in looking at the recommendations for programmatic and policy recommendations, a lot of the economic development, cultural programming, a lot of those incorporate the existing businesses. So the first one within economic development is business support programs, whether this is offering low interest loans, technical assistance to small businesses or entrepreneurs, a downtown punch-a card to incentivize residents and visitors to frequent downtown businesses, pop-up shops, that doesn't directly affect the existing businesses, but the existing property owners or existing vacant space where maybe it's an existing business that just doesn't have a storefront yet that wants to try it out. So we did try to include some of those recommendations. I guess those are more in the text document than in the concept imagery.
Well, thanks for pointing that out. That's a good point.
Tom and Lynn.
Okay. I will pile on everybody else great work. It was a huge effort. I saw you many times and at many events, and I know there was a lot of input and a lot of comments on it. I think we have to keep perspective on what this really is. This is a brainstorming of a community, and there is every idea that you can imagine in here, and everybody kind of tossed everything in. And in doing that, there are things that kind of conflict with each other, specifically something like parking. Everybody says, we really need parking, but could you, give me more space for my event? Or, it sort of riffles through all of this. There is that
Tension.
potential for conflicts and for different opinions. And I don't want Lauren tomorrow run out and start digging water lines for a water fountain. We're not doing that tonight. These are ideas. This is a really high level thing. This is something that gives us maybe some direction to go in the future. Somebody will come and say, well, I got an idea. Well, that kind of fits in with some things like that. And this isn't approving anything. This isn't saying how we will use the new village hall. Here's some ideas on how to use the village hall. This isn't saying specifically what will happen with the fire station. Here's some ideas about the fire station. Those kinds of things. These are ideas, and it's good to have this. It's good to have this kind of plan document, and it's valuable to us, but we have to keep perspective on it. It's just like the comprehensive plan. It doesn't say that we should tear down these houses or build these buildings. It's an idea. It's something to reference. So just want to keep perspective on what I'm voting for here tonight.
Lynn, please.
Yeah, I'm glad Tom went in front of me because I also think that there's another story that this document is telling us, and I think it's important that we acknowledge it in the fact that this is a document that gives our village a future, a financially potentially vibrant future, and we have been talking quite a bit about how we can encourage more commercial business into our area, therefore relieving some of that burden on our residents. And these are the kinds of things that I think do just that, actually put our money where our mouth is a little bit. And so I think it's important that we acknowledge that these are the kinds of things that can alleviate a bit of pressure that we're already feeling here in the village. To Tom's point, it's not putting anything into place, but I do think that it helps us see a future that lots of our residents, I think, want us to be looking into. I also want to touch on your fear or anxiety there, Tim, in the sense that maybe BMO is part of the mixed use. Drive-throughs and banks, not as necessary as it used to be. I don't know that I've stepped into my bank's lobby in at least 2 years. through online banking. And so maybe it's a helpful tool for them to pivot to a new use or a new place, but be on that same footprint. I also think things like leaving the quick trip convenience there for food access, not making that sort of a food desert in that area, I think is a really smart use of encouraging that business to stay and investing in some of the other aspects of how they survive. So I just wanted to acknowledge that I think what this does is it encourages a commercial development in a space that can hold on to it, should hold on to it. And I think that it behooves the village to take some of these things and see what we can do as quickly or as immediately as possible in what we can own, Waterman Triangle Park, Old Village Hall, things like that, to encourage some of that commercial development.
Amanda?
Yeah, same, everybody said, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, a lot of work. So I had a question. On page 27 is where the water feature gets mentioned. And I guess I'm just curious, like, did a lot of people bring this up? Or was this just one person said it and so you threw it in there just as a?
No, it came up in the residential walking tour as well as in the business walking tour. And there was discussion about, a splash pad, and I know that's maybe an existing effort within the community. And this is really not envisioned to replace or negate that effort. It was really a discussion more about what do we do when we're at Waterman Triangle Park, and it'd be nice if there was something for my kids to do, as well as my mother if we're all there. And sometimes it's just nice to see some activity and see water as a central focus rather than it be maybe like the overarching feature of the park. But it did come up a few times, not just
Okay,
one.
yeah, we had an email about it, so I just wanted to follow up with some questions to understand, because I don't feel like that's a big selling point, but, if it was just as a possibility, I'm fine with leaving it in. I just want to caution people that this is just ideas. The village is not spending money on that right now. And then, let's see. Yeah, and when we say water feature, we're talking about, I guess that was my other question, like it could be a drinking fountain, or it could be like a fountain, or it could be like a, I don't know, like a pond or I don't know what we're talking about. It could be a lot of things.
It could be many things, yeah. We weren't thinking drinking fountain, but that would be probably a nice feature within if there is the new restroom building, having that alongside as an option. But yeah, something maybe more subdued, whether it's just, water shooting from pavers with colored lights, or if it's something that runs through, something kind of diminished, but something that you can interact with. Was the thought.
Okay, thank you, and then, when you say permeable pavers, when you were talking about the downtown area, I guess I just want to picture what that is. Is it like stones where the water can go through and they're tightly packed, or does that mean there's space between them for?
Yeah.
I don't talk.
Yeah, they're usually tightly packed. I mean, they look kind of like brick pavers, but you'll notice the material looks unlike an old paver. It's just
More porous.
More porous, yeah. So it allows for the water to go all the way through the brick, not just on the edges of the brick when it's placed.
Okay.
So it just allows the water to permeate, multiple feet down and be able to filter through that system before it goes into the stormwater system.
Okay. And then I love the idea of the scramble light too. I did bring that up to our previous public works director, so that's been on my mind too. That is a great idea because so many people cross more than once, and it makes more sense to just stop everything. It's safer. I like that. Yeah, those are my comments, I guess.
Anyone else? Okay, we have before us resolution number 25-05, adoption of the Village of Oregon Downtown Master Plan. The Planning Commission and staff recommendation motion approved as presented. We have a motion by Jason and a second by Tom. Further questions, comments? Hearing none. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. And thank you, Dan and Ashley, for your efforts and for your time tonight.
Thank you. And if I could just say, I feel like this has been a very, all of the input we received and people we've encountered throughout the whole process, it's been very thoughtful and very kind, and it's really clear that people really care about their community, and so it was really pretty fun to to do the engagement and to work with you all, so thank you.
And just to kind of go off of what Ashley said, we've done a lot of projects in a lot of different communities, and I have continually been impressed by Oregon, and the community has all come out to like
Everything.
bounce around ideas, and it was great.
Great. Thank you again. Okay, item 8, unfinished business, items for discussion or possible action. A, review of the 2025 preliminary debt plan.
Would you like me to speak, Phil?
Yeah, I was going to cover it, but I'll let you.
Okay. You can cover it if you
No,
want.
no.
All right, so we're at the point of the year where we talk about our annual borrowing plan. Of course, we just saw kind of a holdover from our 2024 borrowing plan at the beginning of this meeting and addressing the Wells 6 financing. So we are starting the 2025 plan here. Of course, we approve our budget in November, and then once we get to winter and spring here, we need to figure out the cash that we need to pay for all of these projects. So I won't try to go through everything here, but just want to highlight a few things. So in the packet, there is a schedule which shows all of the 2025 projects and purchases that were in our capital plan as adopted. And then I have another column next to it that shows our preliminary debt plan that we're talking about this evening. In red, highlighted or letters, there is just changes that have occurred between the adopted plan and then what's being put forward this evening. So to have a couple highlights here, so for our general obligation debt, which is the debt related to our property taxes, so what property taxes pay off as we make debt payments over the next few 10 to 20 years. Back in the fall, we estimated and projected over $6 million in debt would be needed to fund all of the projects and purchases for 2025. As you read in the memo here, that's significantly reduced. So we're down to about just over 3.5 million needed for borrowing. So it's about a 40% reduction from what we had expected. So that's good news from a financial impact standpoint and a property tax standpoint. And that may be even reduced maybe a little bit further too, because there's a couple projects we'll want to talk about this evening. And the way that we reduced that was through a couple things. So number one, as we've talked about in the past, when we do our capital plan and do our projections for debt and financial impact in the fall and the summer, we always put together kind of a worst case scenario. So basically funding pretty much everything through debt so that the village board can understand that worst case and what that impact might be and what the impact will be to taxes and utility rates, and then decide various policy decisions based upon that, either taking projects out or moving them around or changing them, that sort of thing, to get to a point where you all feel comfortable with what's being shown to you. And so when we get to this stage of the year, we have a better sense of what kind of cash that we have on hand that we could fund some of these projects with, especially smaller purchases, things that, again, are a smaller dollar amount, or just they're an item that won't even live for the whole life of the obligation itself. So we want to try to avoid paying for things that we're no longer using anymore. Example might be a radio or some small piece of equipment where maybe its useful life is 10 years, but you've tied it up in an obligation that's paid off over 20 years. So we want to try to avoid that, and we don't want to try to pay for those things through cash. Ideally, we have some funding through our operating budget to do some of those things, but our revenue requirements in our operating are very strict, as we know, and so we kind of have these smaller budget items that kind of get stuck in limbo between operating and capital. And so ideally, we try to find these cash sources to pay for those things. And those cash sources usually are derived from budgetary surpluses, so money left over from our budget year, sale of unused or surplus equipment that happens throughout the year. We also have different sources of funds that come in from other places. One thing we've talked about over the last few meetings is all the developers' fees that we've collected for the West Side development area, which we're going to be using towards this intersection project out here. So we go back and we identify, okay, where are all these sources of funds? How are they standing right now? And can we use them to fund some of these items? And so we've identified about over $500,000, $500,000 worth of cash that we can use for some of these projects and purchases this year. And you'll see that reflected in the debt plan. The other thing that has driven down the cost are a couple projects, and I'll go through a few of them. And I'll have Lauren go through a couple of them as well. But the first one, this is a project that's been added in, actually, and that wasn't identified in the capital plan, is the Hillview Heights stormwater improvements. And then also the Village Hall and public roof projects are actually adding in costs as well. And so I'm actually going to have Lauren just go through those couple of projects and kind of detail those to you.
Thanks, Martin. So starting with the Hillview Heights Stormwater Improvements Project, there is a neighborhood on South Main Street. It's really just kind of south of its intersection with South Perry Parkway. And if you're familiar at all with Village View Court, just to the south of that, there is a pond that's behind that court. And that pond discharges primarily via a pipe that comes out, wraps around the back of Village View Court between those houses and the railroad tracks, and then drops into a resident's backyard where it then overland flows through a 15-foot drainage easement that was put in place when the neighborhood was originally platted. The discharge point of that pipe may or may not actually be outside of that 15-foot drainage easement. And the residents, particularly the resident that lives in the house that houses that apron end wall, have had a lot of problems with erosion back behind their houses. These issues were, as far as we can tell, first raised about 10 years ago, and Public Works staff did go back when the village still owned that railroad, went back along that railroad and put in an additional structure. They brought the apron end that discharges up to current standards. They put in riprap as well as fabric underneath that and tried to set that resident up such that their backyard would not get torn up every time a large rain event occurred. And that held for a couple of years, but about 7 or 8 years ago, that resident did notice that riprap had started to see a lot of erosion around the stone. The fabric underneath it was starting to come to the surface, and they were getting a very large scour hole. Some of their neighbors were also starting to see these things. They didn't necessarily reach out to the village, but they were starting to see these scour holes and a lot of erosion back in that area. So that neighborhood started having conversations with the department back, I would say, about 6-7 years ago. And there were discussions about doing something more long-lasting and permanent. Never really got too far off the ground, but last year our staff, as well as an engineer from Town and Country who we use quite a lot, went out, took a look at the issue, and after a lot of survey and doing some preliminary design, came to the conclusion that really the best, most long-term solution out here would actually be to capture this water in a drop structure and a pipe and get it out of those backyards so that you weren't seeing that routine flooding and erosion each time you got any sort of rain event. Now, there will still be some overland flow if that pond does overtop, but that tends to be a lot more diffuse. It's not that straight, targeted, frequent flow that is causing the majority of the issues here. So due to the history of this problem and due to the frequency of it, staff is recommending that we move forward a plan to get that water out of there via a pipe into our right-of-way and into a storm sewer system that eventually will be sized to fit in with any future storm sewer system that might be constructed along that stretch of South Main Street when it is eventually reconstructed, which is something that is on our Public Works radar. So we did receive estimates for what that work would cost, and including some contingency, construction, and design, we were looking at about $140,000 on that one. The other projects that Martin asked me to address, kind of threefold, but have been somewhat combined into two. So these really were in the budget, but for substantially less than current estimates would say that they will likely cost. So the first is a replacement of the roof on the Public Works building. And this is really a need project. The roof is failing in places. They're getting a lot of leakage. The insulation has started to disintegrate, and we're seeing some mold in there. And this really impacts a lot of our equipment that we store in there. We keep some very expensive pieces of equipment in that area, and any kind of water that gets in puts that at risk. It was in the budget for, I believe, approximately $110,000. We did reach out to a specialist to see if that was an accurate assessment of roughly where he would expect to see that number come back, and including design and a pretty healthy contingency. His estimate for kind of a worst case scenario number on that was approximately $300,000. There are also a couple of garage bay doors out there that were identified as not really at the end of their useful lives. They get a lot of cold air that comes through in the winter. They're not sealing particularly well. And so those, we did get estimates on those. They're approximately $35,000. And those were added in for simplicity to this budget. So now when you're looking at those numbers, it's about a $335,000 project. That's what makes that up. The last project that I'll touch on is one that also was in the budget. It was replacing the Village Hall roof and installing solar panels on that roof. It also came with a couple of, I would say, kind of accessory projects. So the first is to repair the skylight that sits over Melissa Woodson's desk. It has started to leak, and so there needs to be some kind of sealing done to really get that into good shape so that we're not seeing that anymore. And then the replacement of a condenser on our air conditioning unit that has been out of service since prior to the village even taking possession of the building. So it hasn't been a problem up till now, but it's not a problem until it's a big problem. And we'd like to get ahead of that and get that replaced. So this is another one. We went out to specialists in the roofing world, and many thanks to Lynn, who reached out to a solar panel company that she'd spoken with before to kind of refresh our estimates there. And that took that project from about $330,000, including the air conditioning and the skylight components, up to approximately $460,000. This is a project that, for both staff time and budget reasons, staff feels might be appropriate to postpone, at least partially, by a year. It would likely give us a more of a chance to think through the project and to design something that really meets the needs of the building versus trying to race through this one and get both a fully new roof on and then get solar panels on as well. Obviously, there is a lot of uncertainty, especially in the renewable energy world right now, and that's certainly something that we're thinking about and considering. I wish I could predict what that's going to look like. Unfortunately, I can't, but one proposal that we had is to move ahead, reduce this number to account for design of that roof this year and any kind of pre-preparation for the solar so that we could get on the schedule for a solar company ahead of time. And if necessary, a roofing company as well to make sure that we scheduled that out correctly and didn't get ahead of ourselves. But to look at getting that air conditioning condenser replaced this year and rolling that into that budget of design of the roof so that we don't run into a situation where it's 95 degrees and 100% humidity and all of a sudden the air conditioning goes out, because that really can impact our operations in the building as well as that of our tenants. We would likely, in this case, look at trying to get a temporary solution for the skylight issues so that we weren't continuing to have those leakages over the year, but we'd try to get a permanent, really good, appropriate fix in with that roofing project next year.
And we're happy to take any questions or if there's any comments on any of that as well. But I just wanted to make sure that Lauren covered a couple of those things because there was obviously some noticeable increases on a couple of those items. As far as the rest of the items on the general obligation side, a couple of things I just wanted to also mention. Number one, we did talk about Gary Dish Park tonight. We moved that design. The design was actually budgeted for last year. It didn't get completed. We're obviously moving that to this year. Improvements wouldn't go to 2026 mostly. So you kind of see that huge drop off in the number there. A couple of other items, and this one will be on the agenda tonight related to East Lincoln Street. That project is planned for 2026. We've been doing design on that since 2023, and there's a couple of items that Lauren will cover on the agenda tonight related to some costs to bring that project to completion for design and some pre-work that needs to be done. We've talked about the CC Alpine intersection that got moved up by the village. You see that noted here now. I have some question marks there for the design of that project. However, I believe that quote is under $155,000, what we determined late last week. So that'll be something that comes forward at the next meeting most likely. And again, that project's going to be funded by cash that we've already have on hand through developer fees that have been collected. That West Side Stormwater Study is related to that project. That's been approved by the board already. Again, cash on hand there. We talked about the Hillview Heights. We talked about the two roof projects. And then the other big project here, and the big reason why the amount of debt is decreasing so substantially for the proposal this year is the senior center facility. We had a lot higher estimate for borrowing at $3.4 million. The project team there is asking for $1.3 million this year in borrowing, so a huge decrease. That amount would fund really the activities that are intended or planned to be completed through 2025 all the way through really this time next year in 2026. So that would be site prep, demo of the vacant buildings that are on the site right now, and then proceeding through the full architectural design of a facility through, again, up till this time next year. So that would really take us to a good decision point. Will probably be happening this time next year in March and April we have a fully designed facility and we're ready to either approve for construction and borrowing of the funds needed for that project. With that, you also see the addition of the Park Street, Waterman Street reconstruction. So we're adding in funding for design related to that project. As the senior center project concept design has gotten underway, they've identified that reconstruction of that stretch of Park Street, designing that in tandem with the senior center project and that street project will add benefits to both of those projects and to the site layout that will occur. That's a project that the Park Street project has been identified as the village as a project to be done since at least 2018 in the TID 5 plan. It hasn't been in our capital plan yet, although it would have most likely been scheduled at some point here in the next few years. So what we're requesting here is, as they progress with the senior center design, we want to make sure that we also design that project as well, so that those two are able to feed off of one another and those projects are done consistent with one another. I guess is there any questions on the general obligation, the property tax side of things?
Lynn?
Thanks. I just have a couple questions. First question is on Gary Dish, because my math isn't mathing. Gary Dish, we had 25,000 set aside for planning, 200,000 for implementation, construction, correct?
Yep.
So we're sliding that basically by a year, 25,000 for planning, 200 for construction. Earlier in this meeting, we just approved Rettler to do the planning. And in that document, there was something about an assumption of it being about a $250,000 project, planning included, correct? So we're really looking at like a deficit, if all projections are what Rettler thinks, a deficit of only 25,000, not the 50,000, correct?
Well, just a couple of things.
Okay, sorry.
So the 200,000 in the adopted 2025 CIP was anticipating that there would be a construction project that would occur, and the 200,000 was an estimate at that time.
Right.
So the project could potentially be 250. So
Okay.
we would have to plan to budget a $250,000 project in 2026.
Sure.
Or if it is 250, the board could say, no, we only want a project that's 200, strip the project down to get it to 200. So you still have those policy decisions in front of you.
Sure.
And obviously the 200 was based on an estimate, and we'll figure that out as we move forward. The 25,000 is for just what you said, the Rettler services that were approved tonight. Now included in I believe it was $32,000 altogether. That includes bidding and construction inspection as well.
Oh.
So that's beyond, we'll do the planning and design this year, but there will become a decision point where we actually approve a project and we would trigger those services within the Rettler agreement. So this 25,000 is expected to cover what will occur at least within 2025 for design.
Oh, fantastic. Great, thanks. And then the last thing is just a comment, which is the postponement of the solar project. I think this is actually really smart. The song that's playing in my head is "You Can't Always Get What You Want." And I think we're proving a point here that we take our spending very seriously. And it's just not the right time for this to happen. It's not what we had budgeted. And just like any household, you got to kind of stick to the budget and postpone things when they don't make sense. So I just wanted to applaud you, Lauren, and Public Works and Martin and the team for acknowledging that this was just not the right time. We're not doing it right. And I think it's worth taking a year and doing it right and doing it well, and budgeting it right next time around, so that we are being as responsible with the money that we have. And that's a commitment to our residents that we need to make, and I'm glad we're doing it.
Amanda?
I agree with Everything you just said. I think it is the responsible thing to do right now. Obviously, we have to fix the leak over Melissa's desk. And get rid of anything that could be, future. But yeah, the solar, if we have to hold off, we hold off. I just want to point out though, because I always have that eye on what's happening nationally. If we do delay it, it could be a 3 to 4 year delay. Just saying, depending on other events that are out of our control. So just acknowledging that it's the smart move, but we have to realize that it might be longer than we think before we can get back to it.
Anybody else? Changes to plan or comments? Okay, I just wanted to note for those that are listening that we're talking about, when we talk about the village hall, we're talking about this building. We're not going to replace the roof on the old village hall. Because I'm just afraid that, that might come across.
It took me a minute to get my head there too, so thanks for saying that.
Sure.
But, yeah.
So this is a preliminary plan and it'll be coming back to us?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have a couple of things. We're not asking for action tonight. We're seeking questions and direction here on what we put together. As Lauren mentioned, we'll probably have some modification to that AC project, maybe for Village Hall. Maybe we'll try to do that for next year, but that would be a much lower cost item. I'll also just add, related to Village Hall, this is a 20-year-old building. And obviously we did the renovation to convert it so that we could use it for our purposes, but there are a lot of components of this building that are starting to reach the end of their useful life as well, so that we need to stay on top of that. And just a point on the utility side of things, a lot of activity there, but maybe a little bit less interesting just because we've talked about a number of these things recently. The first thing I will say is that under number 9 in my memo, we are not having a wastewater treatment plant project. It is a plant project. Just wanted to point that out. I think a wastewater treatment plant project is what I do with my 1-year-old son diaper. So for the utility side of things, so sewer, as far as the sewer utilities going, I think, again, we've talked about and addressed some of these projects within the last few meetings. There's really nothing surprising here other than we talked about the Park Street reconstruction. There's obviously a sewer component of that, so we're budgeting for that here. The wastewater treatment plant project was obviously approved. The Rustic Vineyards and Richards Road pump stations, those things were all rolled into the treatment plant project, so you see all those numbers notified there. And then we have the North Oak Street project, the bids that came back last week. We'll have more information on that at the next meeting. Under the water utility, of course, we talked about well number 6. I identified the 2024 projects that we have kind of crossing over into this year. We're planning that interim financing, as we've discussed, for well 6. We have the Safe Drinking Water Fund loan for well number 3. Those 2 projects, those contracts have been approved. They're moving forward. And then we have a couple of items that have been added here in red. Obviously, the Park Street one we just talked about, and the East Lincoln one, Lauren will talk about on this agenda. But another project added here is the Water Tower Intrazonal Booster Station project. That's a substantial project that's planned for 2028. And talking with Lauren, she's hoping and expecting that project's going to need some planning work to begin this year already. But that is a project that is at least going to be funded in part by impact fees, developer impact fees, and we're already collecting those fees. So the $40,000 that's identified there can be covered by fees that are already collected for that project. As far as the actual obligations that we're expecting to come forward with for the village, I have that in the schedule as well in the packet. Looking at potentially 3 obligations, obviously, number one, we talked about tonight. That's the interim financing for well number 6. And then the 2025 general obligation. Those are all the projects listed there for 3.5 million that we're expecting to borrow for. Now we obviously might remove, a good chunk of that 459,000 for the village hall replacement, so that number will come down a little bit farther. And then we also have 3 water projects that were in the capital plan. A main project, the SCADA system upgrades, which we approved by contract earlier this year, and then some water storage facility maintenance. Right now, we have those identified as a potential revenue bond, just over $700,000 there. But just talking with Ellers recently, there may be some advantages to rolling those into the general obligation instead of a revenue bond. There's pros and cons to doing both. Con is that a general obligation counts against our statutory limit, and we want to keep that limit as flexible as we can. We've had some big facility projects in recent years and have a few on the horizon here, so we want to keep that capacity opened up as much as we can. But there are some financial advantages to rolling those costs into the general obligation, just simply by the fact that we don't have to go through the cost in time of having 2 separate obligations. But there also might be some interest payment savings and things like that. So we're still looking at what makes sense there, but we'll have that all figured out and straightened out within the next month or so.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Martin. Let's see, item 8B, proposal from Gruber Consulting LLC for real estate services related to a 2026 East Lincoln Street reconstruction project at a cost not to exceed $19,500. Staff recommendation, motion to approve. Yeah, Amanda and Tim. Lauren, I'm sure you have a lot to add to this.
I'll try to keep it brief. So this is a component of the East Lincoln Street reconstruction project that is scheduled for 2026 that came up late last year in 2024. Part of the East Lincoln Street project, in fact, a large $623,000 roughly chunk of it is being funded through the Surface Transportation Program, which comes through WSDOT, but is itself funded by federal monies. These in particular came through the bipartisan infrastructure law. It allowed the state to expand this program, and we benefited from that by getting this project funded. As Martin said earlier tonight, we have been designing this project since about 2023, so we have been working on this for a while. One of the items that came to our attention late last year is we have a number of locations where the sidewalk that exists today actually crosses onto private property. That's not a totally uncommon thing. We see that quite frequently, and in fact, when you see our, I will say, locally funded ordinary street reconstruction projects, you'll notice that a lot of the time we actually go onto private property, both to remove and replace the sidewalk, to remove and replace curb stops. It's quite common, and typically what we would do if we were using local funds is we would reach out to the property owner and say, hey, we need to go onto your property so that we can grade back. We will put this back. We will restore things. Sometimes we'll get them to sign a release that allows us to do this work. And this is pretty standard across municipalities. This is not the way that the federal DOT operates. So anytime you touch private property, even if you're going to put it back, even if you don't retain any rights to do anything, even if you're trying to take your facilities off of private property, you need to go through the formal process of getting a temporary limited easement. And that means drawing title work and reaching out to these property owners, working with an acquisition specialist that the DOT itself has approved to do this work, and then offering them compensation for the privilege of going on their property and removing your facilities. So when we first looked at this project, we found that there were probably something like 45 properties that we might need to touch due to the sidewalk issue, but also due to the fact that prior designers had elected to put the water curb stops behind the sidewalk on a block of this. This is not standard practice today for exactly this reason, but that choice was made. When we looked a little bit closer at it, we decided that probably one way to get around a number of these TLEs was to actually try to pull forward the replacement of the problematic curb stops into this year and a small construction project. So Martin kind of alluded to that. We are working on trying to pull together an estimate for that, and we should have those numbers for you next time. But there are 6 properties that we simply can't get away from impacting. And as I mentioned, those are really properties that have sidewalks on them today that we need to get out. And so we did reach out to Fred Gruber. He is the acquisition specialist that is helping us on Richards Road as well, and got a quote and a proposal from him to do this work. And that is what we see tonight in the packet.
Okay. Questions? Okay, we have a motion by Amanda, second by Tim. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Lauren.
Thanks, guys.
Let's see. Pardon me. 8C, scope of services with JT Engineering Incorporated for the County Trunk Highway MM Wolf Street reconstruction project at a cost not to exceed $275,000. Staff recommendation, motion to approve as presented contingent upon approval of Dane County and the Village of Oregon cost sharing agreement and approval of final language contract by the village attorney. Tim, and look like Amanda. Back to Lauren.
All right, I really will try to keep this one brief. So we have had the reconstruction of what we'll call the first phase of Wolf Street, which goes from Janesville Street down through the intersection with Pleasant Oak Drive in our CIP for a number of years. This is a Dane County jurisdictional transfer project, just like the Janesville Street project that occurred a couple of years ago, and then the North Main Street project that was a couple of years before that. So in these types of projects, Dane County splits 50-50 eligible costs of a reconstruction project with the community, and then at the end of the project hands the road over to the community and says, this is yours to maintain. We don't have any more maintenance responsibilities on this road. So the Dane County will also split eligible design costs for a project such as this if the consultant selection is done using the process that they prefer, which is something very similar to a WISDOT qualifications-based selection process. And what that essentially means is you solicit proposals, but you do so without asking what they're going to charge you. So you say, give us all of your qualifications, tell us about your team, tell us about other projects that you have done that are similar to this and why you think you would be the best fit, but don't tell us what you're going to charge us for that. We will negotiate that after we have selected a contractor based on their qualifications. And Dane County, like I said, will split these costs, but only if you go through that process. And so in late December, we did put out an RFP using this framework. We kept that open for a month and then closed the process on the 21st of January. We did receive 5 proposals from 5 qualified local engineering firms, and then a review team with 3 village staff, myself, Elise, and Nick Hack, and then 2 Dane County Highways engineers reviewed all the proposals independently and ranked them all based on a rubric that was included in the RFP, got together and talked through our rankings and used both the numbers that we had used as well as discussion to select a consultant. And the consultant that numerically rose to the top, as well as being one that after discussion, everyone was extremely comfortable with, is JT Engineering, who actually have their Madison headquarters here in town in the old Ticey building, I believe. So after we went through that process and made that selection, we did look at the cost proposal that JT submitted. We had asked all the consultants to submit their cost proposals, albeit separately from the actual proposals at the time of submission, so that we cut down somewhat on the back and forth time. So we did review their cost proposal and found that it was quite reasonable based on the market that we're seeing and the scope of services that they were proposing to provide. So after all of that, we are recommending that the board move forward with approving this $275,000 for the design and construction, administration, and inspection for this project. As Martin alluded to at the Gary Dish Park, only some of this money, the design money, will be spent this year. All of the construction associated work will be done next year. Dane County has put together a intergovernmental agreement that essentially says that they will split half of the eligible costs with us. Eligible costs to Dane County include any design costs associated with the roadway itself and with local storm sewer. Regional storm sewer is not included, so anytime you get a very big culvert that's trying to drain a big area outside of your project, we're not talking about that. We're talking about local inlets and local pipes needed to drain just the project area. It also does not include funding for any utility work that's entirely funded by the municipality. And signalization is also not something that without warrant is funded either at the design stage or at the construction stage by Dane County. However, if the municipality elects to go with a roundabout, they will fund 50% of that. So right now, Dane County has worked through what they feel are eligible costs and have put together an intergovernmental agreement on their side. We have to approve this, our part of it, and then they will provide us that intergovernmental agreement, and then our board will be asked to approve it. So this lets us move that process forward and get JT Engineering going, which, given the very tight time frame on this project, is important to their team.
Questions? Tim?
I would say I'm glad we're moving this project forward, as complicated as it is. I would just say that, pedestrian crossing is a key concern here, and I'm not sure a roundabout solves that. So I guess we'll deal with that when we get to that point, though.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, we have a motion by Higgins, second by Peterson. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Lauren.
Thanks.
Let's see. Item 9, new business, item for discussion and/or possible action. A, review and discuss policies related to village committees, commissions, and boards issuing public statements or similar communications. I think this was came out of a request that Carleen made regarding the DEI committee potentially having a column or letter to the Observer. I see some particular problems with that, and one is the obstacles, and that is each of these committees or commissions are advisory to us, which means that anything they would want to publish or send out would have to come before this board and be approved each time. I'm not sure we want to get started on that road, but I'm certainly, what are others' thoughts on this? Amanda?
I don't necessarily object to, if they want to put something out, having the board look at it and approve it to some extent. I mean, I think the danger is that we get real nitpicky and ask for language changes and things, and it can get messy, but, if there's a real desire, I don't think it should happen often necessarily. I mean, I don't think they're looking at writing an article every week or anything like that for the paper. I feel like, it's just kind of a general letter for a specific purpose. And I'm okay if it comes to the board, just so we can see it and understand what they're saying. I don't think it necessarily means that the whole board has to agree with what they're saying. We're just kind of acknowledging that, like, for example, the DEI committee, feels the need to do this, and we're generally on board. Kind of you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't object, I guess, to having that oversight.
Jason?
Yeah, and I guess, Amanda, in response to you, that I am a little unclear, just based on my memory, whether they were looking at doing something regularly or a one-time thing. And to do something regularly seems like a lot of use of board time if based on the way that it is, that it has to come in front of the village board, which I think it would need to. So I'd hope that wouldn't become a, every other week thing. I guess I'd need more clarification from Carleen on that. But it sounds like, from what you're saying, from what I hear you saying, you're also saying not to change policy, that if a group would want to come, it'd come in front of the village board and for something for publication. And I'd also be okay with that if a committee wanted to make a particular statement. But I don't think that requires us to change a policy, I don't think.
Perhaps Martin and or Derek might have a comment on this.
Yeah, the current, I guess, policy is anything that any statements that any village board committee or commission wants to make would have to come through the village board for approval.
Tim?
There isn't any restriction on a member of a committee speaking out publicly, though, right? Like, I mean, Dan Dick writes, he's on the DEI committee, and he writes columns in the Observer all the time. So I don't think the policy is stopping anybody from speaking on issues that are important to them, that come from the heart.
Right.
It's just when you formalize it that this is from the committee, I think that's a whole different sort of request than sort of making a public statement that's from your own personal perspective.
And I think that's an important distinction, right? Because when you, Tim, are making that kind of statement, you're doing so as an individual, and less so as in your capacity as a trustee, right? Whereas when the body is doing something, right, the body's speaking through some formal action that it's taking, a motion or resolution or something. And then it's as a body, it's putting that out into the world as a formal position of the body. And I think that's just what we need to keep in mind.
Amanda?
Yeah, so question, I mean, I guess just to formalize where that line is, when Dan, for example, writes something, he's not saying this is what the DEI committee thinks, but he might say, I am a member of the DEI committee. And is he then representing them in some fashion? And so it gets a little murky, I think.
It does blur the line a little bit, but I go back to my point is that the official actions of the body are what defines it being official action, right? Just because Tim says something in a meeting doesn't mean that's the position of the village board, right? It's actually it's the village board acting as one, right? There's some formal motion or resolution or ordinance that takes place that is the actual voice of the body, if that makes sense.
So follow up, just real
Sure.
quick for the DEI, if the DEI committee voted to do something, like to write a letter, the village board may or may not have approved it, but it's just saying as a factual statement, the DEI committee voted to put this statement out there. If they put a disclaimer, like the statement hasn't been approved by the village board, but this is what the committee did. I mean,
It's a good question, and I think that's probably, again, where it gets a little bit murky. I think to Martin's point, right, these committees that are created by the board are advisory committees, right? So it could be that the DEI committee meets, and then it passes a resolution saying that we're asking the village board to do ABC, this is our position on these types of issues. That resolution will go back to the village board for its advice, right, for you to consider as the board. And if the observer wants to write about how the DEI committee passed that resolution of saying that thing, then that's fine. But it's a little bit separate from saying, we want to publish this letter to the editor coming from the DEI committee. And I don't have a solid answer to that, but I think it's just more important for you as a board to clarify what are the roles of these advisory committees, what are we asking them to do, right?
I would make the point too is, for instance, the DEI committee developed a DEI village policy, which we adopted, and I'm glad we did that, but it was the recommendation of the DEI committee to the village board to adopt this policy, in which case they could have chose to deny or modify. And if even if the body would pass something saying this is the position of the DEI committee, it is only the position of the DEI committee until we adopt. So and that's, I think, the path that we're potentially going down is starting to having to police, edit, modify these types of actions. I'm not personally comfortable with that. I can't remember whose name, Lynn and then Jason.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Phil. I also think that this is in some ways a hypothetical conversation that would be much easier to have in a with more detail. I think this board is always open to helping educate the community on any given aspect of what our committees do or what we do. And I think that means that if a committee feels so inclined to put together a communication plan or a proposed series of potential letters of 3 or 5 or something that is concrete, I think we would be willing to consider it. But to make a broad policy change for something that we don't see yet in front of us, that does make me nervous. But I would encourage any committee to put together something if they feel that there's something to be communicated, and bring it forward. But
And I just want to clarify for those who are watching, because we've used DEI as an example several times, that this is not an issue of whether we support DEI or not. We very clearly do. This is just about the process of approval of public statements of village committees and boards and things like that. So I just want to put that out there on my behalf and on our behalf.
That's a good point. Thank you, Jason. Amanda.
Just one other thing, since Carlene is the one who put this on here and she is not here tonight, it's possible that we are not understanding the full scope and intent of her thing, of her arguments. So I don't know how you guys feel about potentially like tabling the rest of the discussion until the next meeting where she's present so that we could discuss it further.
Sure.
Just in case we're.
I guess that's where I was gonna go with it. I
Yeah.
don't feel like, I don't understand what Carlene was, I see what she had, was here, and was there some other element to it that was unclear? And I guess I would suggest deferring this until she could
Yeah.
make a clear explanation.
That makes sense. So I guess without objection, we would postpone. Do you have something else?
No,
Oh.
I didn't know if you needed a motion to
I
table
don't-
or something.
I don't think so.
No, unanimous consent is fine.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
All right, thank you. 9B, review and discuss construction debris and garbage ordinances and policies. I think, Tim, you initially brought this up?
Yeah, so obviously we had a resident here at our last meeting complaining about the mess around a construction site, kind of nearby over the other side of Jefferson. I've also noticed at times different companies creating debris and mess, whether it's a construction company pulling trucks out of a muddy field and leaving a trail of mud on the road, or even, frankly, Pelletieri, every time they pick up recycling on a windy day, we get lots of litter scattered around the village. And just wondering, what is a resident's recourse when they see a mess that someone created, and what can we expect to do in terms of response there?
You want to cover this or?
Sure, well, certainly depending on the situation, the response looks different. Would always encourage people to start with giving us a call. So we're aware of the issue. There's a lot of, miles of road and a lot of area to cover within the village, and we can't be everywhere at once. So we always appreciate people letting us know. Today, I talked to somebody who made us aware one of their neighbors hadn't shoveled yet. So reached out to landlord right away, and he was out there and clearing snow within a couple of hours. So that's always, I think, the best course of action. Depending again on the situation, whether it's a contractor for a public project versus more private developer. Again, with these property maintenance issues and other things, we often start with the education approach first. Let people know this is what our ordinance says. This is what we've noticed. We get a complaint. Often we'll verify in the field, make sure that we understand the full situation, go out and lay our own eyes on it or take pictures so we have some kind of record and say this is the condition of the site right now. This is what our ordinance says. What's your plan to clean this up within a timely manner? And let them know that it's something that we're keeping an eye on so that they can kind of expect that we'll be checking in regularly and of course getting back to the original resident or whoever brought up the complaint just to keep them posted. So that's generally how it's gone. The specific issue that was raised at the last village board meeting, did reach out to a couple of the contractors that were specifically mentioned and that are active in the area to let them know. Again, this was brought to village board. This was some of the concerns that were raised. This is what our ordinance says as far as keeping the construction, site clean, debris kept on site if that needs to be covered or whatever it might be for the wind, and making sure that they knew that we would be following up on that. So we've kept in touch with that resident since then, and kind of running, sort of the monkey in the middle just to make sure that there's not direct, confrontations that are happening out on site. But again, we are sort of the enforcers, also the building inspectors, if they are operating under a current building permit. So something like Pelletier isn't necessarily the case, but if there's a building permit, they're subject to all of the requirements of the building permit too. So keeping our building inspectors in the loop. Again, they can't be everywhere at the same time either, but just we're operating on kind of a complaint-driven basis because we don't have a property maintenance enforcement person who's out there proactively looking at all the sites. So whether we're just running around doing maintenance on village facilities or moving through the village ourselves, we're noticing some things, but a lot of those concerns are driven from residents, just making us aware of what they see in their own neighborhoods.
Lynn.
Yeah, I would say, of course, we would love to have a dedicated person to help with these, but in the two situations that you've just provided to us, the previous one and then one from today, seems as if our village staff is handling these quite well. I was impressed to see that Public Works had already been out to try and address that day of the resident that was here. So I would just encourage those who are watching to call and, let us know. Like you said, we can't always know everything, and I do think our village staff does a very nice job of trying to address as many of those concerns as possible. And, let us know if it starts to get too out of control and we can readdress it. But it seems as if, we are addressing it as we are aware.
Had that resident reached out to the village? Because he seemed pretty frustrated, like he talked to some people and wasn't getting anywhere. Had he reached out to us and just not heard, or had he gone at the contractor directly? Do we know that?
Yeah, Lauren, I think, had the first interaction with him a few weeks prior, but I'm not sure if it was before the board meeting.
I think he had reached out to a former staff member and had not received a response. And so I spoke to him for the first time right before that meeting, but he was understandably frustrated that he hadn't heard back.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
I would just add too that, you know, at that particular part of town, there's a lot going on.
Right.
And the wind's blowing and certainly their contractors may have not been keeping up. And I appreciate the gentleman coming in and making us aware and contacting Lauren. And I do think the staff, you know, given our limited staff, I think we're doing a great job. But, you know, when there's that much activity going on in one place, there's bound to be some debris and it's not going to be, we all know that eventually it'll be done and the neighborhood will be cleaned up. And we'd ask people to be a little bit tolerant. Again, I don't fault the gentleman for complaining because I think they were legitimate, but I think a dose of reality is important too.
Yeah, I drove by there and it was pretty bad.
Yeah.
So
No, I believe-
I get his frustration
Yeah.
too, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, you good with that, Tim?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Item 10, reports of village officers, department heads, and consultants. This is for information only. No action by the village board will be taken. See the reports in the meeting packet A of the village administrator report. B, director of finance report, building permits, impact fees, and connection fees collected through January 2025. Lisa is here if you have questions. 10C, police chief report, media release dated February 4th, 2025. Nothing to add, chief? Interesting event. Item 11, announcements and miscellaneous business. A, announcements, comments, communications, upcoming meetings and events, and miscellaneous business. Let's start with department head staffs. Anyone? And village board. A quiet month ahead. 11B, future agenda items. This item gives village board members the opportunity to place a topic on a future agenda for discussion and or potential action. Anyone? Lynn, please.
Because I do not want this document to sit too long on a shelf, I would love to see if we could add an agenda item in the future months for the board to discuss our reactions to the downtown master plan and prioritize some potential next steps that the village would be responsible for.
Okay. Without objection? I think the timeliness of that might be after the referendum and if potential staff members may be absent for one reason or another.
Yes, and we have I mean, this is a good example of a meeting that's just chock full of a lot of things going on, so whenever it seems as if it's most timely appropriate.
Great, thank you. Item 12, closed session business, items for discussion and or possible action. Under Wisconsin statutes 19.85 sub 1 sub E, deliberating or negotiating the purchase of public properties, the investment of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons to require a closed session. Attendance is limited to the village board and its discretion and necessary staff, other officers, and other individuals whose presence is necessary for business at hand. Item A, deliberate request related to the amended and restated development agreement with JAD Bodie Incorporated. Looking for a motion to move to closed session. Tim and Tom, this is a roll call vote.
Peterson?
Yes.
Kirchdorfer?
Yes.
McDaniel?
Yes.
Mankey?
Yes.
Van Campen?
Yes.
And Higgins?
Yes.
Okay, we are in closed session. Thank you all.